The shovel bit into the red Missouri earth with a sound that echoed Penelope Nash's own hollowness, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that this grave would be her last act in a world that had taken everything from her. She stood alone in the vast prairie outside Wyatt, Missouri, on a blistering August afternoon in 1876, the sun beating down mercilessly as sweat traced lines through the dust on her face. The hole was nearly deep enough now, deep enough to hold a body, deep enough to end the pain that had consumed her since the fever took her parents 3 weeks ago and left her with nothing but debts she could never repay and men who would collect in ways that made death seem merciful. She had been 22 years old for exactly 1 week when she decided to dig this grave. 22 years old and completely alone in a world that had no place for women, without family, without money, without hope. The boarding house where her parents had struggled to make ends meet now belonged to Silas Crane, the banker who held the mortgage, and he had made his intentions clear when he came to collect. She could pay with her body or pay with her life, and Penelope Nash had chosen the grave. The shovel slipped from her blistered hands as she finally collapsed to her knees beside the hole she had dug. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, golden grass rippling in waves beneath the brutal sun. She had chosen this spot carefully, far enough from town that no one would find her quickly, far enough that the coyotes might scatter her bones before anyone thought to look. She pulled the small pistol from her apron pocket, the one her father had given her for protection, never imagining she would use it this way. Her hands shook as she checked the chamber. 1 bullet. That was all she had left after selling everything else to try to pay the debts. 1 bullet would be enough. She raised the gun to her temple, closed her eyes, and whispered a prayer her mother had taught her as a child. The metal was warm against her skin. Her finger found the trigger. "I would not do that if I were you." The voice cut through the prairie silence like a knife, deep and calm and utterly unexpected. Penelope's eyes flew open and she spun around, the gun now pointed at the source of the interruption. A man sat atop a massive sorrel horse not 20 feet away, his silhouette dark against the blazing sky. How he had approached without her hearing was a mystery. But there he was, as real as the grave at her feet. "Stay back," she said, her voice cracking. "I mean it. Stay back, or I will shoot." The man raised his hands slowly, palms out. "Easy now. I am not here to hurt you." His voice carried a slight accent, something that spoke of education and distance from this hard-scrabble land. He dismounted with fluid grace, moving with the economy of motion that spoke of years in the saddle. As he stepped closer, she could see him more clearly. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell nearly to his shoulders beneath a worn black hat. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and intense, and they held none of the predatory gleam she had learned to fear in men's gazes. "I said stay back!" Penelope tried to sound threatening, but exhaustion and desperation had leached the strength from her voice. "You are pointing that gun at me now, not yourself," he observed quietly, taking another careful step forward. "That is progress. What do you want? If you are here to rob me, I have nothing, less than nothing. I can see that." His eyes flickered to the grave, then back to her face. "My name is Gideon Wright. I was tracking a lost calf when I saw you from the ridge. I have been watching you dig for the past hour, trying to decide if you were burying something or preparing to bury yourself." "It is none of your business what I'm doing." "Perhaps not." Gideon Wright took off his hat and held it in his hands, a gesture of respect that seemed oddly formal given the circumstances. "But I am making it my business anyway. A woman digging a grave in the middle of nowhere with a gun in her hand, that seems like something a man should not just ride past." "Then you have a clear conscience. You stopped. You can leave now." Penelope's arms were shaking from holding the gun steady. The weapon felt impossibly heavy. "I could," he agreed, "but I will not. Not until you tell me what has driven you to this. Why do you care? You do not even know me." "No," he said softly, "but I know that look in your eyes. I have seen it before, in the mirror, after my wife and daughter died of cholera 5 years ago. I know what it means to believe death is easier than living." Something in his words, in the raw honesty of them, made Penelope's finger ease off the trigger. "Then, you understand." "I understand the feeling. I do not understand the decision." He moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. "I understand that pain can make the whole world seem gray and empty. I understand that sometimes breathing feels like the hardest thing you have ever done. But I also understand that feelings lie, especially the dark ones. You do not know what I am facing? Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and bitter. You do not know what men like Silas Crane will do. Silas Crane, the banker? Gideon's voice sharpened. What does he have to do with this? Everything. He owns the boarding house now. He owns everything my parents worked for, everything they built. And he told me I could pay the debt in his bed, or he would see me arrested for theft and fraud. He said he would make sure I hanged either way, but at least his way I would have a roof over my head for a while. Gideon's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble on his cheek. Silas Crane is a snake and a coward, but he is not worth dying over. Easy for you to say. You are not the one he is threatening. No, but I am someone who can help you, if you will let me. He extended his hand toward her, palm up. Give me the gun, Penelope. She jerked back. How do you know my name? I heard about your parents passing. Everyone in Wyatt heard. Samuel and Margaret Nash were good people, respected people. Their daughter deserves better than this. Their daughter deserves to die with some dignity left, instead of becoming Silas Crane's property. False choice, Gideon said firmly. Those are not the only two options, no matter what he told you. There are always more options, even when we cannot see them. Name one. You could work for me. Penelope laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. I have heard that before. Men offering me work, when what they really want is something else entirely. I have a ranch 10 miles north of here, 3,000 acres, 200 head of cattle, and a house that has not had a proper meal cooked in it, or a proper cleaning in 5 years. I have 4 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse and complain constantly about having to cook their own meals and mend their own clothes. I need a housekeeper, someone to manage the household, cook, clean, do the washing and mending. It is hard work, but it is honest work, and it comes with a private room and wages of $20 a month. $20? The number was staggering. At the boarding house, her parents had been lucky to clear $50 in a good month, and that was feeding and housing 20 boarders. $20, he confirmed. And before you ask, yes, you would have your own room with a lock on the door. The bunkhouse is separate from the main house. You would be safe. Why would you do this? You do not know me? I could be a terrible cook. I could rob you blind. Could you? She met his eyes, those steady gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. No, I could not. But you have no reason to trust that. I have instinct and experience, and a fairly good sense of character. You are not a thief. You are not a killer. You are someone who has been pushed to the edge and cannot see a way back. I am offering you a rope. Whether you grab it or not is up to you. He kept his hand extended. But first, give me the gun. Penelope looked down at the weapon in her shaking hands. It would be so easy to finish what she started. One pull of the trigger, and the pain would stop, the fear would stop, everything would stop. But something in Gideon Wright's voice, in his calm certainty, made her hesitate. He had lost his wife and daughter. He had felt this same darkness, and he had survived it. Slowly, hardly believing what she was doing, she placed the gun in his hand. Gideon immediately emptied the chamber, pocketing the single bullet. Thank you, he said quietly. That took courage. Or cowardice. I am too afraid even to die properly. No. His voice was firm. Dying is easy. Living takes courage, especially when everything feels hopeless. You just chose the harder path. He glanced at the grave she had dug. We should fill this in before we go. Why bother? Because you are not going to need it. And because leaving it open is like leaving a door open to that dark place, we are going to close it. He walked to where her shovel lay and began pushing the dirt back into the hole. After a moment, Penelope joined him. They worked in silence as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The physical labor felt almost meditative, each shovelful of earth a small act of defiance against the despair that had nearly consumed her. When the grave was filled and the earth tamped down, Gideon scattered loose dirt and grass over it until it was nearly invisible. There, he said, gone. Penelope looked at the spot where she had planned to die. Her hands were bleeding from the blisters, her dress was filthy with dirt and sweat, and she felt hollowed out like an old tree. But she was alive. What about Silas Crane? He will not just let this go. He will come for me. Let him try. There was steel in Gideon's voice. My ranch is outside his reach, and if he is foolish enough to show his face there, he will find himself looking down the barrel of more than just one pistol. My men are loyal, and they have no love for bullies and cowards. Why are you doing this? Penelope asked again. Truly, there must be plenty of women in Wyatt who would work for you. Gideon was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the prairie. Because when I was standing where you are now, standing in the darkness and seeing no way out, someone helped me. Old Mexican man named Diego, who found me drunk and angry and half dead in a canyon. He took me to his ranch, gave me work, gave me a reason to keep breathing even when I did not want to. He saved my life. I owe it to him to do the same when I can. Where is he now? Died 2 years ago, left me his ranch in his will, said I had earned it. But the real inheritance was not the land, it was the lesson. That we save each other. That is what people do, if they are worth anything. Penelope felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for weeks. I do not know how to thank you. Thank me by living. Thank me by taking the job and proving that today was not a mistake. He gestured to his horse. Can you ride? Yes, my father taught me. Good. We will stop by town to collect your things, then head to the ranch. We should get there before full dark. What if Silas Crane sees us? Then he sees us. You are not his property, Penelope Nash. You are not anyone's property. The sooner he understands that, the better. They rode back toward Wyatt as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Penelope sat behind Gideon on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist to keep her balance. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his back. It was the first time in weeks she had felt even remotely safe. Wyatt, Missouri was a town of perhaps 500 souls, built around a main street lined with false-fronted buildings that tried to look more substantial than they were. The general store, the saloon, the bank, the church, the hotel, and her parents' boarding house all crowded together, as if seeking safety in numbers against the vast prairie that surrounded them. As they rode down the main street, people stopped to stare. Penelope could feel their eyes on her, could imagine their whispers. There was Samuel Nash's daughter, the one who had nowhere to go, the one Silas Crane had his eye on. Gideon seemed oblivious to the attention, or, more likely, simply did not care. He rode straight to the boarding house and dismounted, then helped Penelope down. Get what you need. I will wait here. It will only take a moment. I do not have much. Everything of value had been sold to try to pay the debts. All that remained were a few dresses, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. She hurried inside, grateful that the boarding house was empty in the late afternoon lull. Most of the boarders would be at their work or in the saloon. She climbed the narrow stairs to the small room that had been hers since childhood and began gathering her meager possessions. She was folding her second dress when she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Well, well, if it is not Miss Nash. Penelope's blood ran cold. She turned to find Silas Crane filling the doorway, his bulk blocking any escape. He was a large man, running to fat, with small eyes and thick fingers adorned with rings. He smelled of hair oil and cigars, and something sour beneath. Mr. Crane, I am just collecting my things. I will be out of your property within the hour. Oh, I do not think so. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. You and I have unfinished business, Miss Nash. You have been avoiding me. I have been mourning my parents. Yes, very sad. But mourning does not pay debts, does it? And you owe me a substantial sum, $247 to be precise. I know what I owe, but I cannot pay it. I have nothing left to sell. That is not entirely true, is it? His eyes crawled over her like insects. You have yourself, and I am prepared to be very generous. I will forgive the entire debt in exchange for your companionship. You move into the hotel, into a nice room I have already prepared, and we can come to an arrangement that benefits us both. No. Penelope's voice shook but held firm. I will not do that. You do not have a choice. Girl, I own this property. I can have you arrested for trespassing right now. Or worse, I could tell the sheriff you have been stealing from the boarders. I have witnesses who will swear to it. That is a lie. It is the truth if I say it is. Who do you think the law will believe? A respected banker and property owner, or a desperate girl with nothing to her name? He moved closer, reaching for her arm. Stop making this difficult. You might even enjoy yourself if you give it a chance. Get away from her! The voice came from the doorway, cold and hard as iron. Gideon Wright stood there, and though he was not as large as Silas Crane, there was something in his bearing that made the banker step back. "This is a private conversation," Crane blustered. "You have no business here, Wright. Miss Nash is my employee. That makes it my business." Gideon's hand rested casually on the gun at his hip. "She is leaving with me now. If you have a problem with that, we can discuss it outside." "Your employee?" Crane's face was reddening. "You cannot just sweep in and steal her out from under me. She owes me money." "How much?" $247. "I will pay it. Come to my ranch tomorrow, and I will have the cash for you." Crane's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you do that?" "Because unlike you, I pay my employees fairly, and I do not cheat widows and orphans. Now, step aside." "This is not over," Crane said, but he moved out of the doorway. "Not by a long shot. You may have bought her for today, Wright, but we will see how long your charity lasts." Gideon ignored him, walking to Penelope and taking her bag. "Ready?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked out of the room together, down the stairs, and out into the street where Gideon's horse waited. Penelope could feel Silas Crane's eyes burning into her back, but she did not look back. That part of her life was over. "I will pay you back," she said as Gideon helped her onto the horse. "Every cent, even if it takes years. We can discuss terms later. Right now, let us just get home." Home. The word felt strange and foreign and impossibly precious. Penelope held tight as they rode out of Wyatt, leaving the town and its whispers and Silas Crane's threats behind them. The prairie opened up before them, vast and golden in the fading light, and for the first time in weeks, Penelope felt like she could breathe. The ride to Gideon's ranch took nearly 2 hours. They followed a well-worn trail north through rolling grassland dotted with cattle bearing the W brand. As the last light faded from the sky, they crested a low hill, and Penelope saw the ranch spread out below them. It was larger than she had expected. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, 2 stories tall with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. To the left stood a substantial barn, a stable, and several corrals. The bunkhouse was a long, low building, set some distance from the main house, smoke rising from its chimney. Everything looked well-maintained and prosperous, a working ranch built by someone who knew what they were doing. "It is beautiful," Penelope said softly. "It was Diego's dream," Gideon replied. "He spent 40 years building this place from nothing. Now it is mine to maintain and improve. Some days that feels like the greatest honor I have ever been given. Other days it feels like a burden I am not worthy of carrying." They rode down to the main house, where a man emerged from the barn to take the horse. He was young, perhaps 25, with sandy hair and an easy smile. "Boss, you were back late. We were starting to wonder." "Found a lost calf," Gideon said, then added, "and hired a new housekeeper. Tom, this is Miss Penelope Nash. She will be living in the house and managing the household. Penelope, this is Tom Fletcher, my foreman." Tom's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he touched his hat respectfully. "Pleasure to meet you, madam. About time we had someone who knows what they are doing in the kitchen. The boys and I are getting mighty tired of burnt beans and hard biscuits." "I will do my best," Penelope said, managing a small smile. "Come on," Gideon said, leading her toward the house. "Let me show you around." The interior of the house was exactly as he had described it. The furnishings were good quality, but clearly neglected, covered in a fine layer of dust. The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, but in desperate need of cleaning. The parlor held a beautiful stone fireplace, but the floor was tracked with mud and the windows were grimy. It was a house built for comfort and family, now occupied by a man living alone with his ghosts. "Your room is upstairs," Gideon said, lighting a lamp and leading her up a staircase. "There are 4 bedrooms. I use the one at the front. You can have your choice of the others." He showed her to a room at the back of the house, overlooking the prairie. It held a bed with a sturdy frame, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Simple but clean, and more importantly, it had a door with a lock. "The key is in the lock," Gideon said. "It is yours. The only other key is in my desk downstairs, and it will stay there unless you ask for it." "Thank you," Penelope said, "for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know what else to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just get some rest. We can talk about the work tomorrow." He paused in the doorway. "Are you hungry? I could heat up some beans." "I am too tired to eat. I just need to sleep." Sleep then. And Penelope? He looked back at her, his expression serious. You are safe here. I give you my word. Whatever you are afraid of, it will not happen under my roof. After he left, closing the door behind him, Penelope turned the key in the lock and listened to the satisfying click. Then she sat on the bed and let herself cry, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for her parents, for the life she had lost, for the terror of the past weeks and the exhaustion of holding herself together. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was empty and wrung out, and so tired she could barely move. She changed into her nightgown, washed her face in the basin, and climbed into bed. The sheets smelled of sunshine and lavender, clean and fresh. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought about the grave she had dug, the bullet she had been prepared to fire, and the gray-eyed cowboy who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even known to speak. She was not foolish enough to think her problems were solved. She still owed Gideon Wright $247. She still had to face the world that had nearly broken her. She still had to figure out how to live in this new reality. But for tonight, in this room with its locked door and clean sheets, she was safe, and that was more than she had dared to hope for when the sun rose that morning. Penelope woke to golden sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and panic spiked through her before memory returned. The ranch. Gideon Wright. Safety. She dressed quickly in her plainest dress and tied her hair back in a simple bun. Her hands were stiff and sore from yesterday's digging, the blisters raw and angry, but she ignored the pain. She had work to do, a debt to repay, and a new life to build. Downstairs she found Gideon in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast. The coffee smelled good, but the eggs in the pan were burning, and the bacon was more charcoal than meat. "Let me," she said, moving to the stove. He stepped back gratefully. "I am many things, but a cook is not one of them. Diego used to say I could burn water." Penelope salvaged what she could of the breakfast and started fresh with what could not be saved. Within 20 minutes she had eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy on the table. Gideon ate with the enthusiasm of a man who had been living on his own, poor cooking for far too long. "This is wonderful," he said between bites. "The men are going to think they have died and gone to heaven." "How many men are there?" "4, plus Tom the foreman. They take their meals in the bunkhouse usually, but I told them to come up to the main house for dinner going forward. We have a proper dining room, might as well use it." "I can do that. What else do you need from me?" They spent the morning going over the household routine. The basic cleaning and cooking was straightforward enough, and Penelope was grateful to discover that her experience at the boarding house had prepared her well. But there were also accounts to manage, supplies to order from town, and a vegetable garden that had gone to weeds but could be recovered. "The important thing," Gideon said, "is that you not work yourself into the ground. This is a job, not an endurance test. If you need help with anything, ask. The men can be called on for heavy lifting or repairs." "I appreciate that, but I need to prove I can do this work, that you did not make a mistake hiring me." "I did not make a mistake, but there is a difference between working hard and working yourself to death. I would rather you pace yourself and stay healthy than burn out in a month trying to prove something." It was a fair point, and Penelope agreed. They were hashing out the final details when Tom Fletcher knocked on the door. "Boss, we have a visitor. Silas Crane just rode up, and he does not look happy." Gideon's expression hardened. "Right on schedule. Tom, go round up the men and have them come up to the house. All of them." "Yes, sir." Tom disappeared. "Stay inside," Gideon told Penelope. "Let me handle this." "But you said you would pay him. I have the money from selling my mother's jewelry. It is not all of it, but it is something. Keep your money. I told you I would handle this, and I will." He walked outside onto the porch, and Penelope followed despite his instruction, standing just inside the doorway where she could see and hear. Silas Crane sat on a large bay horse, looking as out of place on a working ranch as a pig in a parlor. He had brought 2 men with him, rough-looking characters with guns on their hips. Behind Gideon, Tom and the 4 ranch hands were gathering, forming a loose semicircle. None of them were openly holding weapons, but the message was clear. "Mr. Crane," Gideon said coolly, "you are trespassing on my property. I am collecting a debt, as is my legal right. You said you would have the money for me today. I said come tomorrow. This is today. But I am feeling generous, so I will pay you now and we can be done with each other." Gideon pulled a leather pouch from his pocket and tossed it to Crane. It landed in the dirt at his horse's feet. $250. That covers the debt plus interest. Crane made no move to pick it up. "I do not want your money, Wright. The girl owes me, not you. We had an arrangement." "You had a threat and a lie? That is not an arrangement. But either way, the debt is paid. Penelope Nash owes you nothing. Now get off my land. She was my property the moment her parents died. They owed me, so she owes me. That is how the law works." "That is not how any law works, and you know it. You are trying to intimidate a young woman into prostitution. There are laws against that too, last I checked." Crane's face was red now. "You have no right to interfere." "I have every right. She works for me, she lives on my property, and she is under my protection. If you have a legal claim, take it to a judge. But we both know you will not, because no judge will side with you. So, pick up your money and leave, or leave without it. Either way, you are leaving." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. The ranch hands stood silent and watchful, hands near their guns. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, Crane gestured to one of his men, who dismounted and picked up the money pouch. "This is not over, Wright. I have friends, influence. I can make things very difficult for you. You can try. But I suggest you remember that your bank operates in a town that depends on ranchers like me. Push too hard, and you might find your depositors taking their business elsewhere. The nearest other bank is in Springfield, but I hear they treat their customers with respect." It was a threat delivered calmly, but it landed like a punch. Crane's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. He was a businessman, and businessmen understood leverage. "Perhaps we can come to an understanding," he said, his tone shifting. "I am willing to forgive and forget if certain conditions are met. The only condition is that you leave Miss Nash alone, permanently. No more threats, no more lies, no more attempts to intimidate her. She is off limits. In exchange, I will not encourage every rancher within 50 miles to move their accounts to Springfield. We have a large community meeting next month. Be a shame if banking practices became a topic of discussion." Crane's jaw worked, but he was beaten, and he knew it. "Fine. The girl is your problem now. But when she proves more trouble than she is worth, do not come crying to me." "I never cry to cowards. Safe travels, Mr. Crane." Crane jerked his horse's head around and galloped off, his two hired guns following. The ranch hands relaxed, a few of them chuckling. "That was well done, boss," Tom said. "Crane is a bully, but he is not stupid. He knows when he is outmatched." "Let us hope so." Gideon turned and saw Penelope standing in the doorway. "I thought I told you to stay inside." "I wanted to hear. Thank you for standing up to him, and thank you for the money. I will pay you back, I promise. We will work something out, but not today. Today you have a kitchen to organize and a house to reclaim, and I have cattle to check on." He smiled at her, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from handsome to something that made her heart skip unexpectedly. "Welcome to the Wright Ranch, Penelope Nash. I think you're going to fit in just fine." The days settled into a rhythm that was both exhausting and oddly comforting. Penelope rose before dawn to start breakfast, cooked for 7 hungry men, cleaned the main house from top to bottom, managed the accounts, ordered supplies, and began the slow process of reclaiming the neglected vegetable garden. By the time she collapsed into bed each night, she was too tired to think, too tired to remember the darkness that had nearly consumed her. But she was also too tired to notice at first how her eyes began following Gideon Wright as he moved through his days, how she listened for his voice among the others, how she started timing her work so she might cross paths with him, might earn one of those rare smiles that made something warm bloom in her chest. It crept up on her slowly, this awareness of him. The way he treated his men with respect and fairness. The way he worked as hard as any of them, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. The way he checked on her each evening, making sure she was not overworking, asking if she needed anything. He was kind without being condescending, protective without being possessive, and he never once made her feel like she owed him anything beyond honest work. 3 weeks after she arrived at the ranch, Penelope was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Gideon came in from the range, dusty and tired. He washed up at the pump outside, then poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching her work. "You have done wonders with this place," he said. It actually feels like a home again. That is the idea, is it not? A house is just a building until someone makes it a home. Penelope was rolling out pie dough, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Is it starting to feel like home to you? The question caught her off guard. She paused, considering. Yes, she said slowly. It is, more than anywhere else has felt in a long time. Even before my parents died, the boarding house never really felt like home. It was work, constant work, and worry about making ends meet. Here, the work is still hard, but it feels different. It feels like I am building something instead of just trying to survive. I am glad. Gideon was quiet for a moment, then said, I have been meaning to talk to you about the debt, the $250 I paid Crane. Penelope's hands stilled on the dough. I have been keeping track of my wages. After expenses for the new dresses I needed and other necessities, I should have it paid off in about 18 months, assuming I save everything. That is too long. I have a better idea. Her heart sank. Here it came, the real price of his help. She had been foolish to think he was different. What kind of idea? Forget the debt. Consider it paid. She turned to stare at him. What? You heard me. Forget it. You do not owe me anything. I cannot do that. It is too much money. It is my money, and I can do what I want with it, and what I want is for you to stop carrying that burden. You have been through enough, Penelope. You should not have to spend the next year and a half working just to pay off a debt that was never yours in the first place. But I owe you. You saved my life. You do not owe me your life. You just owe me honest work for honest wages, which you have been giving me from the day you arrived. He set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly. I know what it is like to feel like you owe someone everything. When Diego took me in, I tried to repay him too, worked myself nearly to death, trying to be worthy of his kindness. You know what he told me? He said that the best way to repay a gift is to accept it with grace and then pass it forward when you get the chance. So, accept this gift, Penelope. Let the debt go. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on repaying him, but the expression on his face stopped her. He meant it. This was not manipulation or a trick. He genuinely wanted to give her this freedom. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. I do not know how to thank you properly, but thank you. You already do, every day. Now, what kind of pie are you making? I hope it is apple. Cherry. I found a seller in town who had some preserved cherries. But I can make apple next time if you prefer. Cherry is perfect. You are perfect. He said it casually, already standing to leave, but the words hung in the air like hummingbirds, bright and impossible to ignore. Penelope watched him go, her heart hammering in her chest. You are perfect. Did he mean that? Did he have any idea what those words did to her? She forced herself to focus on the pie, to get dinner on the table, to carry on as if her entire world had not just shifted on its axis. That night, lying in her bed, she admitted the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Gideon Wright. It was foolish and dangerous and completely beyond her control. She was falling in love with a man who was still mourning his wife. A man who had hired her out of kindness, not attraction. A man who saw her as someone to be protected and helped, not desired. She should stop these feelings before they grew stronger. She should protect her heart, maintain a professional distance, remember her place. But as she drifted towards sleep, all she could think about was the way Gideon's eyes crinkled when he smiled, and the way her name sounded in his deep voice, and how safe she felt when he was near. She was in trouble, and she knew it. The summer heat intensified as July turned to August, baking the Missouri prairie until the grass crunched underfoot, and the cattle sought shade wherever they could find it. Gideon and his men spent long days moving the herd to better grazing, checking water sources, and preparing for the fall cattle drive to market. Penelope kept the house running smoothly, provided hearty meals, and tried not to think too much about the way her pulse jumped every time Gideon walked into a room. It was on a particularly hot afternoon, with the men all out on the range, that Penelope decided to tackle the one room in the house she had been avoiding, Gideon's bedroom. He had never asked her to clean it, had never even mentioned it, but it bothered her that she was maintaining the entire house except that one space. She told herself it was professional pride that drove her upstairs with her cleaning supplies. She told herself it had nothing to do with curiosity about the private space of the man who occupied far too many of her thoughts. She was lying to herself. She knocked first, though she knew the room was empty, then pushed open the door. The room was larger than hers, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. The furniture was sturdy and well made. A large bed, a wardrobe, a desk, a chair. But it was the personal items that caught her attention. On the desk sat a daguerreotype in a silver frame. A woman and a small girl, maybe 4 years old. They had the frozen, serious expressions common to photographs, but there was warmth in their faces, love in the way the woman's hand rested on the child's shoulder, Gideon's wife and daughter, the family he had lost. Penelope picked up the frame, studying the woman's face. She had been pretty, with dark hair and a gentle expression, the kind of woman who probably made a warm home and raised a happy child. The kind of woman Gideon had loved enough to nearly die from losing. How could Penelope ever compete with that? Not that she was competing, she was just an employee, a woman he had helped out of kindness. But still, the thought nagged at her. Even if by some miracle Gideon ever looked at her as more than a housekeeper, how could she measure up to the memory of a beloved wife? "What are you doing in here?" Penelope jumped, nearly dropping the photograph. Gideon stood in the doorway, and she could not read his expression. "I am sorry. I was going to clean the room. I should have asked first. I came back for some papers I forgot." He walked into the room, his boots loud on the wooden floor. "You do not need to clean in here. I can manage. The rest of the house is spotless. It seemed wrong to leave one room undone." She set the photograph back on the desk carefully. "Your wife was very beautiful." "Yes, she was." Gideon's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "What was her name?" "Elena, and my daughter was Sophia." "Those are lovely names." Penelope gathered her courage. "You must miss them terribly." "Every day." He picked up the photograph, looking at it with an expression that made Penelope's heart ache. "But the missing has changed over time. At first, it was like drowning. I could not breathe for the weight of it. Everything reminded me of them, and I wanted to die just to make the pain stop. That is when Diego found me. He saved your life." "He did. He told me that grief is the price we pay for love, and that the only way through it is straight through it, that running from it or trying to drown it just makes it last longer. So, I stopped running. I let myself feel it, all of it, until slowly it became something I could live with instead of something I was dying from." "Do you still love her?" The question came out before Penelope could stop it, and she immediately wished she could take it back. But Gideon did not seem offended. He set the photograph down and looked at Penelope directly. "I will always love her. She was my wife, the mother of my child. That does not go away. But loving someone who is gone is different than loving someone who is here. Loving a memory is not the same as loving a person." He paused. "Why do you ask?" Penelope felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just curious. I am sorry. I did not mean to pry." "Penelope?" He said her name gently and stepped closer. "You are not prying. You have every right to ask questions, to want to understand. We live in the same house, work together every day. It is natural to be curious about each other. Are you curious about me?" The question was bold, probably too bold, but she could not seem to stop herself. "Yes." His gray eyes held hers. "Very curious. You are a mystery, Penelope Nash. Strong enough to survive losing everything, brave enough to choose life even when death seemed easier, kind enough to take care of a house full of rough men without complaint. Who are you really? What do you dream about? What makes you happy?" No one had asked her questions like that in longer than she could remember. "I dream about having a place that is truly mine, a home, a family, people who need me and want me around. And I am happy here, happier than I have been in years. Working for you, being part of this ranch, it feels right in a way nothing else ever has." "I am glad you are here," Gideon said quietly. "More glad than I probably should be." The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility. Penelope could barely breathe. "What does that mean?" "It means that you have become more to me than just an employee. It means that I look forward to seeing you in the morning, and I find excuses to come back to the house during the day just to talk to you. It means that I think about you more than I should, and I am starting to wonder if maybe, possibly, you might think about me too." Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I do think about you. All the time. Too much. I know I should not. I know you are my employer, and I am your housekeeper, and you are still mourning your wife, but I cannot seem to help it. I am not mourning any more, Gideon said. Or if I am, it is not the kind of mourning that prevents me from living. Elena would not have wanted that. She would have wanted me to be happy, to find love again if I could. And Penelope, I think I am finding it, with you. The words hung between them, precious and fragile. Penelope wanted to reach for him, wanted to close the distance and see if his lips were as soft as they looked, but she was also terrified. What if this was a mistake? What if she was misunderstanding? What if he changed his mind tomorrow and she lost everything again? As if reading her mind, Gideon said, "We do not have to rush this. I know you have been through a lot. I know trust does not come easy after what you experienced with Crane and the others. We can take this as slow as you need. But I wanted you to know how I feel, that you are not alone in whatever this is growing between us." "I am afraid," Penelope admitted. "I am afraid of losing this, of losing you. I am afraid I am not enough, not good enough, not what you need." "You are more than enough. You are everything." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "May I kiss you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Gideon leaned in and kissed her softly, a brush of lips that was tender and careful and full of promise. It was nothing like the rough grabs and stolen kisses she had dodged from boarders and men in town. This was different. This was a question and an answer, a beginning and a homecoming all at once. When he pulled back, Penelope was dizzy. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, indeed." Gideon was smiling, really smiling, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. You should do it again." He laughed, a warm sound that filled the room, and kissed her again. This time it was deeper, more certain, and Penelope felt herself melting into him. His arms came around her, holding her close, and she felt safe and wanted and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I am courting you, Penelope Nash, properly and officially. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours, if you will have me." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will have you. I want nothing more." They stood there in his bedroom, holding each other, as the afternoon sun painted golden squares on the floor and the ranch carried on around them. Penelope felt like she was glowing from the inside out, like every nerve in her body was singing. She had come to this ranch expecting to work off a debt and then move on. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found home. She had found love. The courtship was sweet and slow, and everything Penelope had not known she wanted. Gideon treated her like something precious, never pressuring her, always respectful of her boundaries. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie. He taught her to ride properly, patient with her inexperience. He talked to her for hours about his dreams for the ranch, about his past, about his hopes for the future. And he listened when she talked about her parents, about the boarding house, about the darkness she had nearly succumbed to. The ranch hands noticed, of course, and they approved wholeheartedly. Tom Fletcher, the foreman, cornered Penelope one morning in the kitchen. "I have known Gideon for 3 years now," Tom said quietly. "Worked for him since Diego died. And I have never seen him happy like he is now. You are good for him, Miss Penelope. Do not let anyone tell you different." "Thank you, Tom. That means a great deal." "Just speaking the truth. We all think it. You brought life back to this place and to him. The men and I, we appreciate it." But not everyone was pleased with the development. 6 weeks after Penelope and Gideon began courting, trouble returned in the form of Silas Crane. It was late September, the heat finally breaking into cooler weather when Crane rode up to the ranch again. This time he came alone, which somehow made Penelope more nervous than if he had brought an army. Gideon met him at the property line, and Penelope watched from the porch, close enough to hear. "I thought we settled our business," Gideon said coldly. "We did. I am not here about the girl. I am here about your mortgage." Gideon's expression hardened. "What about it?" "The note is due in 3 months, $2,500. I wanted to remind you personally, make sure you had not forgotten." "I have not forgotten. I will have the payment ready." "See that you do. Because if you default, well, The bank will have no choice but to foreclose. Be ashamed to lose this beautiful ranch, especially now that you have a woman here to share it with." Crane's smile was oily. "I trust Miss Nash as well. You do not get to ask about her. You do not get to even think about her. Our business is concluded. For now, but 3 months is not very long. A lot can happen. Cattle could sicken, markets could shift. Accidents happen on ranches all the time." The threat was thinly veiled. "If anything happens to my cattle or my men, I will know where to look. And Crane, I do not forgive twice. You come after me or mine, and I will make sure you regret it in ways you cannot imagine." Such big talk from a man who might be homeless in 3 months. "Good day, Mr. Wright. I will see you in December." After Crane left, Gideon stood staring after him for a long moment before returning to the house. Penelope met him at the door. "Is it true? Do you owe him $2,500? "Yes. Diego took out the mortgage to expand the ranch 5 years ago. I have been paying it down, but the final balloon payment is due December 1st. Do you have the money?" Gideon ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "If the cattle drive goes well, yes. We are taking 200 head to market in 2 weeks. If we get a fair price, I will have enough for the mortgage plus operating expenses through the winter. But if anything goes wrong, if the price is low or we lose cattle on the drive, it will be close. What can I do to help?" "Nothing. This is my problem." "It is our problem," Penelope corrected. "We are courting. Your troubles are my troubles. So, tell me what I can do." He looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms. "You can keep being exactly who you are. You can keep making this house a home and giving me a reason to fight for it. And you can trust that I will figure this out. I have not come this far to lose everything now." "I trust you," she said, meaning it completely. "We will get through this together." But worry gnawed at her over the following days as Gideon and his men prepared for the cattle drive. 200 head of cattle to Kansas City, a journey of over 150 miles that would take 2 weeks. It was dangerous work, and anything could go wrong. The night before the drive was set to leave, Gideon asked Penelope to walk with him. They strolled out to the rise behind the house, where they could see the prairie stretching endlessly under a sky full of stars. "I want you to know something," Gideon said, taking her hand. "No matter what happens with the mortgage, no matter what Crane does or does not do, you are safe. I have some money set aside, enough to get you established somewhere else if the worst happens. Tom has a brother who runs a ranch in Kansas. He has already agreed to take you on as a housekeeper if needed." "I do not want to go to Kansas," Penelope said fiercely. "I want to stay here, with you." "I want that too. But I need to know you will be taken care of no matter what. Gideon Wright, you listen to me. I have been to the edge of the grave and back. I have survived losing everything once already. I am not some fragile flower that needs protecting from the world. I am strong enough to face whatever comes, as long as we face it together. So stop trying to plan for my future without me, and start including me in the decisions." He stared at her, then started to laugh. "You are magnificent when you are angry. Did you know that?" "I am not angry. I am determined. There is a difference." "I stand corrected. You are magnificent when you are determined." He pulled her close, kissing her under the stars. "When I get back from this drive, when the mortgage is paid and Crane is dealt with, I am going to ask you a very important question. I want you to spend these 2 weeks thinking about how you might answer." Penelope's heart skipped. What kind of question? The kind that changes everything, the kind that means forever. He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Think about it. That is all I ask." The cattle drive left at dawn, 5 men and 200 head of cattle disappearing into the prairie sunrise. Penelope stood on the porch and watched until they were out of sight, her heart tight with worry and hope tangled together. Tom Fletcher had stayed behind to manage the ranch, along with one of the younger hands, a boy named Marcus, who could not have been more than 18. The 3 of them maintained the daily routine, but the house felt empty without Gideon in it, without his presence filling the spaces. The days passed slowly. Penelope kept herself busy with deep cleaning, preserving vegetables from the garden, and preparing for winter. She tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong on a cattle drive. Stampedes, river crossings, thieves, accidents. She tried not to calculate over and over whether the money would be enough. And she tried not to think too much about the question Gideon had promised to ask. But of course, she thought about little else. "When I get back," he had said, I am going to ask you a very important question. It could only mean one thing. Marriage. He was going to propose. And Penelope knew, with absolute certainty, that she would say yes. She had never imagined herself married. At the boarding house, she had watched too many women trapped in loveless marriages, bound to men who saw them as property. She had never wanted that life. But this, what she had with Gideon, was different. He saw her as an equal, a partner. He respected her strength even as he cherished her softness. He made her feel safe and valued and loved. She wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. She wanted to build a family with him, to fill this big house with children and laughter. She wanted to grow old on this ranch, watching sunsets from the porch and knowing she was exactly where she belonged. 2 weeks. She just had to wait 2 weeks. But on the 10th day, Tom Fletcher came racing back from town with news that made Penelope's blood run cold. "There is talk in Wyatt," Tom said, breathless from his hard ride. "Silas Crane has been saying the cattle drive was ambushed, that rustlers took the entire herd and killed the men." "No." The word came out as a whisper. "That cannot be true. I do not know if it is or not, but Crane is spreading the story, and people are believing him. He is telling everyone the ranch will be foreclosed by the end of the month." How would he even know what happened to the drive? They are days away, and there is no telegraph between here and Kansas City on that route. Tom's expression was grim. "That is what worries me. How would he know unless he arranged it himself?" The implications were staggering. He would not, he could not. To kill 5 men for a mortgage payment, that is murder. That is $2,500 and a valuable ranch. For a man like Crane, that might be motivation enough. Penelope sank into a chair, her mind racing. "What do we do?" "We wait, and we hope it is just a rumor. But, Miss Penelope, you should prepare yourself. If something has happened to the boss, if the drive really was attacked, then everything changes." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that Gideon was fine, that he would come home safely. But the fear that had been lurking in the back of her mind since he left now roared to the forefront. What if something had happened? What if Crane really had arranged an ambush? What if Gideon was hurt, or worse? No, she refused to believe it. Gideon was strong and smart and capable. He would come home. He had to come home. But the days continued to pass with no word, and the rumors grew stronger. Crane began making plans publicly for the foreclosure sale. He told people in town that the ranch would be his by Christmas, and that he planned to turn it into a large commercial operation. Penelope felt like she was living through a nightmare. She had finally found happiness, finally found a home and a man to love, and now it was all being torn away again. The universe seemed determined to prove that happiness was not meant for women like her. On the 14th day, as dusk was falling and Penelope was preparing a dinner she had no appetite to eat, Marcus came running from the north pasture. "Riders coming! A lot of them!" Penelope's heart leaped into her throat. She ran outside, straining to see through the fading light. A group of horsemen was approaching, pushing cattle ahead of them. As they drew closer, she could make out 5 riders. 5. All 5. They had all come home, and leading them, sitting tall in his saddle, was Gideon. Penelope did not remember deciding to run. She just found herself racing across the yard, her skirts hiked up, tears streaming down her face. Gideon saw her coming and spurred his horse forward, closing the distance between them. He swung down from the saddle before the horse had fully stopped and caught Penelope as she launched herself into his arms. "You are alive," she sobbed into his chest. "You are alive. I thought you were dead. Crane said you were dead. I am very much alive. We all are." He held her tight, his heart beating strong and steady against her ear. "What did Crane say?" "That you were ambushed, that rustlers took the herd and killed everyone. He has been telling everyone in town, preparing to foreclose." Gideon's arms tightened around her. "That lying snake. Nothing like that happened. The drive went perfectly. We got a great price for the cattle, better than expected. I have more than enough for the mortgage, with plenty left over." Penelope pulled back to look at him, hardly daring to believe. "Truly? Truly?" He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. "Did you really think I would leave you? Did you think I would not fight with everything I have to come back to you? I was so afraid. So was I, afraid that something would happen to keep me from coming home to you. But we made it. Penelope, We survived, and now we are going to make Crane regret ever messing with us." The men took care of the horses and cattle, while Gideon and Penelope went into the house. He was filthy from 2 weeks on the trail, exhausted and hungry, but he would not let go of her hand. "There is something I need to do," he said. "Something I have been thinking about every day I was gone. Gideon, you should eat. You should rest. This is more important." He led her into the parlor, and then, to her shock, dropped to one knee in front of her. From his pocket he pulled a small box. "I bought this in Kansas City, from a jeweler there. I hope you like it?" He opened the box to reveal a gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. Penelope gasped. "Penelope Nash," Gideon said, his gray eyes locked on hers. "I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you make this house a home and the way you make me want to be a better man. I love you so much that every day I was gone felt like a year, and all I could think about was getting back to you. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my family? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch and make me the happiest man in Missouri?" "Yes." The word came out choked with tears, but clear and certain. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times. Yes, I love you, Gideon. I love you so much it terrifies me. I want to marry you and spend the rest of my life with you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and kissed her, a deep, claiming kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We will get married as soon as possible. I do not want to wait, but first, I have a banker to deal with." The next morning, Gideon rode into Wyatt with Tom Fletcher and the other ranch hands flanking him. Penelope insisted on coming too, riding the gentle mare Gideon had been teaching her on. They made an impressive sight, 6 riders in formation, and people stopped to stare as they rode down the main street. They went straight to the bank. Silas Crane looked up from his desk as they entered, and the color drained from his face when he saw Gideon very much alive. "Mr. Wright, what a surprise. I imagine it is since you told everyone I was dead." Gideon's voice was cold as winter. Funny thing, spreading false rumors about someone's death could almost be seen as fraud or maybe slander. "I have a lawyer in Springfield who is very interested in the details. I do not know what you mean. I simply heard a rumor and passed it along." "You heard a rumor about an ambush that never happened, in a location you should have had no way of knowing about, and you immediately started making plans to seize my ranch. That seems rather suspicious, does it not?" Crane's eyes darted to the door, but Tom and the ranch hands were blocking it. "You cannot prove anything." "Maybe not, but I do not have to." Gideon pulled a thick envelope from his coat and dropped it on the desk. $2,500. My mortgage is paid in full. 2 months early. I will take the deed now." Crane stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "The payment is not due until December. I am aware. I am paying early, unless you have some reason to refuse legal payment on a debt." For a long moment, Crane looked like he might refuse anyway, but there were too many witnesses, and he knew it. Slowly, he reached into his desk and pulled out a document. "Sign here." Gideon read every word of the document carefully before signing. Then Crane stamped it paid and handed over the deed to the ranch. "Congratulations. The property is yours free and clear. I know, and Mr. Crane, if I ever hear of you spreading rumors about me or my family again, if you ever come near my ranch or my fiancée again, I will not be as forgiving as I was today. I will ruin you. I will make sure every rancher in 3 counties knows exactly what kind of man you are. Do you understand me?" Crane's face was red with suppressed rage, but he nodded. "We understand each other." "Good. Then I believe our business is concluded, permanently." They left the bank together, and Penelope felt like she was floating. It was over. The debt was paid, the ranch was safe, and she was engaged to the man she loved. Everything that had seemed impossible just weeks ago was now reality. They stopped at the general store to order supplies and at the church to speak with the pastor about a wedding. Reverend James was delighted to hear the news and agreed to perform the ceremony in 2 weeks, giving them time to make proper arrangements. As they rode back to the ranch, Penelope looked over at Gideon and felt her heart swell with joy. He caught her looking and smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made everything inside her go warm. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I am thinking about the day I dug that grave, about how certain I was that my life was over, that I had no future worth living for. And now look at me. I am engaged to a wonderful man. I have a home I love. I have a future that is bright and full of possibility. It feels like a miracle. It is not a miracle. It is just life. Sometimes it is brutal and dark, and it tries to break us. But sometimes, if we are very lucky and very stubborn, it gives us exactly what we need. You needed saving that day, and I needed someone to save. We found each other at exactly the right moment. Do you believe in fate? I believe in choice. You chose to live, even when dying seemed easier. I chose to stop that day instead of riding past. We keep choosing each other, every day. That is better than fate. That is commitment. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and then Penelope said, I want children, lots of them. This house is too big for just 2 people. Gideon laughed. How many is lots? I do not know. 4, 5, however many we are blessed with. I want this house full of noise and laughter. I want to give them the kind of childhood I never had, full of love and security and knowing they are wanted. That sounds perfect, although you should know that I am terrible at thinking up names. You will probably have to handle that part. I think we can manage together. She paused, then added, I want our first to be a boy, a strong, healthy boy who looks just like his father. And I want a daughter who is as brave and beautiful as her mother. We will just have to see what the universe gives us. The wedding was held on a perfect October afternoon, with golden leaves drifting from the trees and the prairie grass rippling in the breeze. Penelope wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Gideon had insisted on buying for her, and she carried wildflowers from the prairie. Gideon wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Tom Fletcher stood as best man, and they had invited all the ranch hands, along with a few neighbors and friends from town. The people who had known Samuel and Margaret Nash came to support their daughter, glad to see her finding happiness after tragedy. When Reverend James pronounced them man and wife, Gideon kissed Penelope like she was air and he had been drowning. The gathered crowd cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle, and suddenly there was dancing and food and celebration. As the sun set and the stars came out, Gideon pulled Penelope away from the party, leading her to the rise behind the house where they had stood that night before the cattle drive. Hello, wife, he said softly. Hello, husband. The word felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. Are you happy? Happier than I ever imagined I could be. This has been the most perfect day. It is just the beginning. We have a whole lifetime of days ahead of us. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking out at the prairie, at the ranch that was now theirs together, at the future stretching before them like an open road. Thank you, Penelope whispered. For what? For stopping that day, for not riding past, for seeing me when I could not see myself, for giving me a reason to live. You gave me the same thing. I thought I was done, that I would just maintain the ranch and live out my days alone. You brought color back to my world. You made me want to dream again. He turned her in his arms, looking down at her with such love it made her breath catch. I think we saved each other, Penelope Wright. I think you are right. They kissed under the stars, and Penelope thought about the grave she had dug, the bullet she had been ready to fire, the darkness that had nearly consumed her. All of that seemed like a lifetime ago, a different person's story. She was not that desperate girl anymore. She was a woman with a husband she loved, a home she cherished, and a future full of possibility. She had thought she would be buried in the grave she dug, but a cowboy came and changed her fate completely. And in saving her, he had saved himself. That was the real miracle, the real gift. Not just survival, but the chance to thrive, to love, to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. The years that followed were full and rich. Penelope had been right about wanting children. Their first was indeed a boy, strong and healthy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel after Penelope's father. A year and a half later came a daughter, Elena Sophia, named for the family that had come before. Then another son, then twin girls, then one more boy to round out the family at 6 children total. The house that had been so empty and neglected became the heart of a bustling family. Penelope managed it all with the same efficiency she had brought to managing the boarding house, but with joy instead of desperation. She taught her children to read and write, to work hard and treat others with kindness, to stand up for themselves and for what was right. Gideon expanded the ranch, buying neighboring properties as they became available, until the Wright Ranch was one of the largest and most successful in the county. But he never forgot where he came from, never forgot the darkness that had nearly consumed him. He made it a point to help others the way Diego had helped him, the way he had helped Penelope. Young men down on their luck always found work at the Wright Ranch. Families struggling found a meal and a helping hand. Tom Fletcher eventually married a schoolteacher from town and built a house on the ranch property, becoming not just a foreman, but a partner in the operation. The ranch hands who had stood by Gideon in those early days became family, with standing invitations to Sunday dinners and holidays. Silas Crane tried once more to cause trouble, spreading rumors about Gideon's business practices. But the community had seen who Gideon Wright really was, and Crane found no traction for his lies. Eventually, he left Wyatt entirely, moving to St. Louis, where his reputation had not preceded him. On their 10th anniversary, Gideon took Penelope back to the spot where he had first found her, where she had been digging her grave. The prairie looked the same, golden and endless, but everything else had changed. "Do you ever think about that day?" Gideon asked. "Sometimes, usually when I'm having a hard day with the children, or when something goes wrong. I remember how dark everything seemed, how certain I was that there was no way forward. And then I look at my life now, at our children, at you, at everything we have built together, and I am so grateful I did not pull that trigger. So am I." He pulled her close. "I cannot imagine my life without you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope Wright. We are the best thing that ever happened to each other. We saved each other, remember?" "I remember." He kissed her, soft and sweet, the kiss of a man who knew exactly how lucky he was. "I love you, today, tomorrow, forever." "Forever," Penelope agreed. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, back to the house full of children and noise and love, back to the life they had built from nothing but courage and choice and stubborn refusal to give up. It was not the life Penelope had been born to, not the life she had expected. It was so much better. She had thought she would be buried in the grave she dug. Instead, she had been reborn. The cowboy who stopped that day had not just saved her life. He had given her a reason to live it, to fight for it, to fill it with love and purpose and joy. And that, Penelope thought, as she watched Gideon swing their youngest son into his arms, as she heard the laughter of her children and saw the home they had made together, that was the greatest gift anyone could ever receive. Not just survival, but the chance to truly live, to love and be loved, to matter. She had been given a second chance, and she had seized it with both hands. And every day for the rest of her life, she would be grateful for the gray-eyed cowboy who had seen her in her darkest moment and offered her a rope to climb back into the light. The Wright Ranch continued to prosper over the decades. As the children grew, each found their own path. Samuel, the eldest, took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch, working alongside his father until Gideon was ready to step back. Elena Sophia married a doctor and moved to Kansas City, though she returned often with her own growing family. The younger children scattered to various pursuits, but all of them carried with them the lessons their parents had taught them about resilience, kindness, and the importance of helping others. Penelope never forgot where she had come from, or how close she had come to ending her own story before it truly began. She volunteered at the church, helping women in difficult situations, offering them work and support the way Gideon had once offered it to her. She became known throughout the county as someone who could be counted on, someone who understood suffering but refused to let it have the final word. When their youngest child left home to attend college in St. Louis, Gideon, and Penelope found themselves alone in the house again for the first time in over 20 years. But it was a different kind of alone than the loneliness Gideon had felt before Penelope arrived. This was the comfortable solitude of two people who knew each other completely, who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. They still took walks to the rise behind the house on clear evenings, still stood together looking out at the prairie and counting their blessings. They still kissed like newlyweds, still held hands across the dinner table, still made each other laugh with inside jokes and shared memories. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked one evening many years after that first meeting. They were both gray now, their faces lined with age and laughter. Stopping that day? Taking on a desperate woman with no prospects and a mountain of troubles? Gideon looked at her like she had lost her mind. Regret marrying the love of my life? Regret building this family and this life with you? Penelope Wright, you must be going senile in your old age. She laughed and swatted his arm. I am being serious. So am I. That day, stopping to help you was the best decision I ever made. Well, second best. Asking you to marry me was the first best. But they are related, so I suppose they count as one decision. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to live. I was ready to die, Gideon. I had given up completely, and you pulled me back. We pulled each other back. Do not forget, I was just going through the motions before you came along. Working the ranch, managing the property, but not really living. You reminded me what it meant to be alive, to feel joy, to hope for the future. We needed each other, and we found each other at exactly the right time. I like to think my parents had something to do with it, that maybe they were watching out for me, even after they were gone, and they sent you to me when I needed you most. Maybe they did. I like to think Diego and Elena and Sophia were watching too, making sure I did not waste my second chance at happiness. However it happened, I am grateful. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. After a moment, Penelope said, I want to go back there, to the spot where you found me. I have not been there in years, and I think I need to see it again. Are you sure? It might bring back difficult memories. I am sure. I need to see it, to remind myself how far I have come, and I want to do it with you beside me. They rode out the next afternoon, Penelope on the gentle mare she had ridden for years, and Gideon on a newer horse, his faithful sorrel having been retired to pasture years ago. The prairie looked exactly as it had all those decades ago, unchanging and eternal, golden grass rippling in waves beneath the endless sky. Penelope found the spot easily, could have walked to it blind. Time and weather had long since erased any trace of the grave she had dug, but she knew it was there, knew exactly where her knees had touched the earth as she raised a gun to her temple. She dismounted and stood there, trying to see it through younger eyes, trying to remember what it had felt like to be that desperate. But it was like trying to remember a dream, hazy and distant. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who had lived and loved and built a life worth celebrating. This is where it happened, she said softly. This is where I was ready to end it all. Gideon came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. This is where your real life began. Do you know what I see when I look at this spot now? I do not see death. I see possibility. I see the moment when everything changed, when I chose life even though I did not know I was choosing. I see the beginning of everything good that followed. That is a better way to see it. I think we should plant something here, a tree maybe, or some wildflowers, something to mark this as a place of rebirth instead of death. I think that is a perfect idea. They returned to the spot a week later with several young oak saplings and a collection of wildflower seeds. Together, they planted the trees in a circle around the spot where the grave had been. They scattered the seeds and watered everything carefully. Oaks are strong, Penelope said as they worked. They weather storms and droughts and harsh winters. They provide shelter and shade. They last for generations. I like the symbolism. These trees will be here long after we are gone, Gideon agreed. Our great-grandchildren will play in their shade and wonder who planted them. Then we should leave them a message so they know. Penelope pulled a piece of paper from her pocket and a small metal box she had brought for this purpose. She wrote carefully, then showed the message to Gideon. It read, These trees were planted in the autumn of 1896 by Gideon and Penelope Wright to mark a spot where death was rejected and life was chosen. To whoever reads this, choose life, choose love, choose hope. No matter how dark things seem, there is always a way forward if you are brave enough to take it. They sealed the message in the box and buried it at the base of the largest oak. Then they stood together, holding hands, looking at the circle of small trees that would grow tall and strong over the years. It is a good legacy, Gideon said. We have had a good life, Penelope replied. Better than I ever imagined possible. As they rode back to the ranch one last time, Penelope felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had faced her past, marked the spot where her new life began, and planted seeds for the future. Everything was exactly as it should be. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow, as they always do. They lost friends to age and illness. They celebrated births and marriages, mourned deaths and losses. But through it all, Gideon and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership only deepening with time. When Gideon finally passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him, she mourned him with the depth of feeling that only comes from a lifetime of true partnership. But even in her grief, she was grateful. Grateful for every day they had shared, every moment of joy and sorrow, every laugh and tear and quiet evening on the porch. She lived another 5 years after his death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The ranch was in good hands with Samuel and his family. The legacy she and Gideon had built was secure. On a warm spring day, Penelope asked to be taken out to the circle of oaks they had planted so many years ago. The trees were massive now, their branches creating a canopy of green that dappled the ground with shadow and light. Her great-grandson Samuel III, a boy of 14 who had been named for both his great-great-grandfather and his grandfather, rode with her, helping her dismount and settle on a blanket in the shade. "Great-grandmother, why did you plant these trees here?" he asked. Penelope smiled at him, seeing in his young face echoes of Gideon, of her own father, of all the people she had loved. "This is where I met your great-grandfather. This is where he saved my life, and I saved his. This is where everything good began." "Tell me the story again," the boy asked, settling beside her. "Tell me about the cowboy and the grave." So Penelope told him, told the story she had told her children and grandchildren, the story of a desperate girl and a kind man, and a chance meeting that changed 2 lives forever. She told him about the darkness and the light, about choosing life even when death seemed easier, about building something beautiful from ashes and despair. The boy listened, rapt, and when she finished he said, "You were very brave, great-grandmother." "No," Penelope corrected gently. "I was very scared. But your great-grandfather taught me that bravery is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to go forward despite the fear. That is the real lesson, Samuel. When life gets hard, when things seem impossible, you keep going. You choose hope. You choose love. You choose life." "I will remember," the boy promised. Penelope closed her eyes, listening to the wind rustle through the oak leaves, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She thought about Gideon, waiting for her somewhere beyond this life. She thought about her parents and Diego, and all the people who had shaped her journey. She thought about the grave she had dug and the cowboy who had stopped, and she smiled. It had been a good life. No, better than good. It had been a life worth living, worth fighting for, worth celebrating. She had been given a second chance, and she had made the most of it. She had loved deeply and been deeply loved. She had mattered. She had made a difference. That evening, Penelope died peacefully under the oaks, with her great-grandson holding her hand and her family gathered around. She went with a smile on her face and no regrets in her heart. They buried her next to Gideon on a hill overlooking the ranch with a headstone that read, "Penelope Nash Wright, 1854-1926. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She chose life, and in doing so, taught us all how to truly live." The ranch continued through the generations, and the circle of oaks became a family landmark, a place where Wright descendants went to remember their history and draw strength from the story of their ancestors. The metal box was found decades later during a family reunion, and the message inside became a treasured family legacy, copied and shared and passed down through the years. And on quiet evenings, when the prairie wind whispered through the oak leaves, locals swore they could sometimes see 2 figures standing in the shadows, holding hands and looking out at the land they had loved. Whether it was ghost or memory or simply wishful thinking, no one could say. But the story endured, the story of a woman who thought she would be buried in the grave she dug, and the cowboy who came and changed her fate completely, and the love that blossomed between them and lasted beyond death itself. It was a story of hope in darkness, of second chances, of the transformative power of compassion and courage. It was a story that reminded people that no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always a choice, always a possibility for change, always a reason to hold on for one more day. And in that message, in that legacy, Gideon and Penelope Wright lived on, their love and their lessons echoing through the generations, teaching each new Wright descendant the most important truth of all, that we save each other. That is what people do if they are worth anything, and that choosing life, choosing love, choosing hope, is always, always worth it. The end.